Good evening, everyone. My name is Marva Wisdom, and welcome to this, our 14th Finding the Balance during COVID-19. It's hard to believe that we've done that many seminars. I want to start today with a land acknowledgement. It has always been critical for us to ensure that we're acknowledging the land that we are on, but more so this month, September 30th, being National Indigenous Month for acknowledgement and recognizing the problems, the issues that we have faced with residential schools. Recognizing the continued and ongoing effects of colonialism in this area, Ontario and Canada. And as people living and working in Waterloo, Wellington, we would like to acknowledge and honor that Guelph is situated on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, specifically the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also acknowledge and honor that our offices in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and Fergus are situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised by the Government of Canada to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. This is the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, which include the Seneca, Cayuga, Tuscarora, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk First Nations. And of course, the office that I speak of is our primary host, Canadian Mental Health Association. Today, these gathering places are home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And with gratitude, we acknowledge that the settler population has been able to benefit from this beautiful land. As citizens, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of this land, acknowledging the land and the people whose land we are on is only a part of the process of decolonization. And I invite you, we invite you to check this month, especially for the activities taking place that helps to bring our awareness to what we can do toward truth and reconciliation. And at this time, I would like to introduce our panelists for this month. Each month, Anne-Marie and Helen will be our 2 recurring panelists. And we often will have a guest speaker as well. They'll be answering questions about the mental and physical implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of Course, Anne-Marie Zadlik is a primary care physician in Guelph, providing comfort and guidance to thousands during the pandemic. Anne-Marie's become a Facebook sensation, as you all know, with her daily posts of encouragement and sound scientific knowledge about COVID-19 and other health issues. And our second recurring panelist and host through the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo, Wellington is Helen Fishburn. She is the Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo, Wellington. She's a lifelong advocate for the increased awareness of mental health issues and has dedicated her career to advancing the design of an improved mental health care system. Tonight, Tracy was not able to join us, and this is Tracy Curtis. And of course, this seminar and this webinar series came out of an opportunity to look at Bracelet of Hope and provide support and sponsorship for the work that is being done with Bracelet of Hope to ensure that folks in Lesotho, South Africa, especially have medical care that they need, whether it's fighting HIV/AIDS, or in this case, also the pandemic. And we're sorry that she couldn't be here tonight, but we feel her presence. And I also want to say that we have 2 amazing individuals behind the scenes, Allison and Megan, that is making this possible. So let's get started with a few housekeeping rules, and then I'll ask Anne-Marie first and then Helen for some opening remarks. Tonight, you may be joining us either on the Zoom webinar link or via our Facebook Live broadcast. We certainly are ready to receive your questions on either platform. So we're asking you to feel free to type your questions into the Q&A section of either Zoom or Facebook, and we will do our best to answer all of your questions tonight. And what we don't answer, we will attempt to follow up. And you'll see through the night, Helen and or Anne-Marie with certainty will likely be answering some and typing away, responding to some of your questions, including also answering it directly, of course, verbally. We are recording this webinar and it will be posted on the CMHA Waterloo Wellington webpage and on Dr. Zadlik's Facebook pages. So you will find it there. Give us about 24 hours or so after the webinar, and you'll have all of the information that we're sharing here. And so let me now go to Anne-Marie for some opening remarks, followed directly by Helen. Anne-Marie, please.
Thanks, Marva. Welcome, everybody. Man, this is getting to be a really recurring event. I think I'm going to leave the words of wisdom to Helen tonight. And I'm going to just talk about some facts and where we are now compared to where we were, I think, a couple of months ago with our last webinar. It's important to know where we're at with vaccinations because that's the key to getting out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think right now, 85% of Ontarians have a first dose and 80% have 2 doses. In Guelph, that's a lot higher. I think we're at 89% 2 doses. So as a part of the world, we are among the most vaccinated. And that is key to feeling comfortable in our environments and to spreading our wings a little bit as we go through the next 6 months. Still adhere to mask mandates and to gathering mandates. They have not changed. We're still in stage 3. We're not in the exit plan just yet. And I'm hoping we don't shift that until all the kids are vaccinated, which we're hoping will start in January, but could be sooner given the fact that Pfizer has approved, or Pfizer has confirmed that their vaccine is effective. So lots of hope on the horizon, but we have to stick it out over the winter months. And it'll be great to have some webinars in the future about how to manage things through the winter months with less restrictions than we had last year.
Over to Helen.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our 14th webinar. It's awesome to be back with you all again. Every time we have a webinar, I always reflect on where we were the last time we met, which in this case was July. This sure has been quite a ride for all of us, a long, exhausting ride with many unexpected twists and turns and those waves. And we're still on this ride. Every time there's a wave, it crests and we can rest for a bit, take a breath, and then there's another wave approaching, so we have to gear up again. We're doing our very best to hang on, everyone is, and certainly hold on to that hope, and the vaccination numbers that Anne-Marie has just referenced certainly give us hope. It's been encouraging to see those vaccination rates rising slowly across our communities, but as Anne-Marie said, it certainly does not mean we're safe completely yet or out of the woods. The sneaky and nasty Delta variant makes us all vulnerable still, especially those folks who are not vaccinated. So tonight we're going to talk about how we continue to live with the ongoing pandemic, both the COVID and its variants, as well as the mental health impact of that. We know that they're all going to be here with us for quite a while longer, and people are tired, they're frustrated, the tensions are high. So what do we need to do in order to survive and thrive under these kinds of conditions? So that's what we'll be unpacking tonight.
Thank you, Helen. That's awesome. Thank you both for the comments that you have made to really set us up for moving forward. So the first question I'm going to ask, we have a few questions that have come in quite early. And then we have questions that come in live. So we're going to be at this till about 8 o'clock or so, maybe 8:15, and then we will wrap up after that. And we're also trying to move out any duplicate questions. That way we can get to as many of your questions with responses as possible. So Helen, mental, physical, emotional exhaustion has been happening with this pandemic for all of us. What does recovery look like, and what are expectations? What are the expectations about that? Someone said 1 week of holiday doesn't cut it.
And that's very true, for sure. Great question. So I would say like the past 18 months has led to the most extraordinary living circumstances for all of us. Many things that, typically bring us comfort, like a hug, family dinner, just going to a concert. Those are the things we haven't been able to do because certainly we're at risk if we do those things. So after 18 months of this, it certainly left us feeling deeply exhausted and depleted, and not just regular tired, but that deep down tired. So, Marva, you mentioned the 1 week. Normally when we take a break from work and we go off on a week's vacation or a staycation, we just take a break. We come back to work, we feel refreshed, recharged, relaxed, we're ready to go. That's not the case anymore. There's so much extra stress and anxiety and worry that's on our shoulders that really means we need more recovery time than what we normally do. And it's important to know that and then actually plan for that. Recovery is very much a conscious effort. So when you wake up in the morning and you think about, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, these are automatic things. What I would really love to suggest is that we incorporate some of those mental health wellness routines into your day as well. So then that becomes automatic. So here's just some 3 quick ideas. Along with brushing your teeth and washing your face, incorporate some mindfulness and a gratitude perspective into your day. It takes 5 minutes, but it calms your mind and it helps you focus on things to be grateful for. Also, take 10 minutes a day and do something that brings you joy. It could be walking your dog. It could be reading a book in a quiet nook. It could be a walk around the block, but it brings you joy. And then the third thing that is so important to incorporate into our day-to-day routine is that ability to connect with each other, because that really combats the isolation, whether that's a call, a text, a Zoom meeting, something meaningful, again, even if it's for 10 minutes, but those are 3 things that we can easily incorporate into our life. And then it helps us manage through these times.
Thank you, Helen. I like the term recovery is a conscious effort. And one place that I have found that you can find some of the mindfulness exercises, some brief ones, is on YouTube. Really surprised at that, because one of the hardest things is to start. Where do I start and how do I start? I have found that very, very helpful. And one of the things that I will add to what you have said, I think those are all perfect ways to move forward in your day, is talking to a friend or someone you know who builds you up.
Yes.
Because sometimes we end up getting on the phone with folks who sees the glass half empty, and you're spending so much time trying to help them that you're depleted when you're done. And if you get 2 or 3 of those, you might forget about all that mindfulness in the morning. So that's one of the things I'll add to everything that you have said. It's so critical and so important, especially now. Helen, I'm going to do a really quick follow-up question. Are you seeing an increase in mental health needs? Do you continue to see that, or is that declining? I know that when we spoke in July, you saw that.
I would say that we haven't seen a sharp increase. What we have seen is a holding steady. So the new normal, so I'll just give you a reference point here, 24/7, we used to get about 4,500 calls a month prior to the pandemic. We now get about 6,500 calls per month. That has not dropped, that has just maintained. And that is what we're considering as the new normal. So that's a total change in baseline for us in terms of mental health and addictions, and really speaks to the needs that have changed. But we haven't seen a dip or a change at all in that. It's just holding steady.
Thank you. Now, Anne Marie, a lot of parents are worried that they have children that are under 12, and they're wondering about vaccine transmission, especially now being back in school. Children under 12, should they be becoming eligible for vaccinations right now? Karen is asking this question.
So Pfizer has just indicated that their vaccine is safe in children, and they are about to approach the FDA, which is the approval body in the States for emergency use. Canadians usually follow a little bit behind the FDA. So we've been watching this data for months now. I think all the powers that be realize it's a safe vaccine in kids under 12. It will likely be approved by Health Canada by, I'll say, October, November, and then ready for use in December or January. So we fully expect to be able to start immunizing our kids under 12 by January. Here's what I think about kids under 12 in schools. It's all about whether or not the people in their circles outside of school are vaccinated. And this is a reason why we should all get vaccinated if we can, because it will protect our children under 12 in the school system. So if a child is coming from a home where every adult is vaccinated, then it's far less likely that COVID-19 will be transmitted to them. The school cases right now, after 2 weeks of school, are all cases that have been transmitted outside of the school. There have not yet been transmissions that started in the school and went to other children, which is good news. Because the school staff have to be vaccinated or have to test regularly, and the kids have to wear masks, that's for 5 and up, it's very safe in the school system, especially since parents should be reviewing the signs and symptoms their kids might have, and teachers should be reviewing that too. So I've heard of lots of children with colds and flus right now. So they are picking up colds, but their COVID tests are negative. So I think parents can relax. We're good. If we were in the same situation as the Americans with a high case count and a huge number of positive COVID cases in the community, with adults transmitting to the kids and then they're going into the schools, then we're in trouble. But the fact that we are so well vaccinated with so few cases a day, and it's steadied out at below 700 as a 7-day average, our kids are safe, and we have to hold on to the present restrictions until the kids are vaccinated. I think we'll see a difference in the spring once they are vaccinated.
That's great. Thank you for letting us know. And of course, the flus and cold season is coming up, and that will add increased anxiety and more calls to here 24/7 and elsewhere, because you're not sure whether it's cold or flu or whether it is indeed COVID-19. And Marie, you touched on earlier, and we talked before we went online about double vaccinated people, incidents of, you use a proper term and I cannot remember the term, but transmissibility. I have to write that down in bold. Can you say a couple of things about that? In your previous answer, I must tell you that you knocked off about 6 questions about vaccination for children, which is great.
Good.
We're being very efficient.
Yeah. So the most recent research, and I can provide this website, it is an Ontario public health website, shows that the unvaccinated, there's about a 6 to 10% chance of picking up COVID, when you're fully vaccinated. So in the fully vaccinated, about 6% are getting COVID. But of those 6%, an extremely small percentage is ending up seriously ill in hospital, less than 0.001%. So you can still get COVID when you're fully vaccinated, but if you are exposed to somebody who has COVID, your immune system is so good when you're vaccinated at keeping most of the virus out. It's all about viral load. How much virus gets sneezed on you or coughed on you. If a lot gets coughed on you and you are vaccinated, your immune system keeps most of that virus out, kills it with antibodies you get from the vaccine. And so you don't have as much virus that circulates in your bloodstream. You are not as ill, and that's what counts. You will not become as ill. It's much, much less likely that you'll be hospitalized, and even more unlikely that you'll end up in the ICU or that you'll die. Very, very low risk of that. But it's the reason why I'll keep saying this. We have to adhere to our public health restrictions, is because it still can be transmitted in breakthrough cases in people who are vaccinated. And we want to protect our kids who are not vaccinated, and we want to protect individuals who are not comfortable with vaccinations so far by continuing to wear masks, keeping our distance, and adhering strictly to gathering guidelines, because we're hearing about outbreaks at weddings where there are 200 people. That's way above what public health recommends. Right now, outdoor gatherings should only be 100, indoor 25.
Mhm. Thank you. And wear your mask when you're indoors.
Yeah.
The 6-foot rule. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Helen to ask a question. And again, Emery, you did answer a couple of those other questions in that around classroom and parents. How do we manage all the divisions in our community, Helen? Vaccinations, systemic racism, vaccine hesitancy, people are hesitant. How do we come together as a community rather than be ripped apart? I was in Toronto a few days ago, and heard about the thousands and thousands of people in marches who were totally against the vaccine.
Mhm. Yeah, it's heavy. I would say that there's a lot of sadness in our world right now. Turn on the TV. It's really disheartening to see those anti-vax protests in front of hospitals where staff have worked so hard to keep people alive, literally, through this pandemic. You turn on the TV and you see the images in Afghanistan, which again are incredibly heartbreaking. It just feels like there's a lot of sadness in our world right now, and it's very, very easy to absorb that sadness, especially if you watch a lot of cable TV and a lot of these news programs. It's very easy, without realizing, for that to seep in. I think how we manage the sadness will determine whether we come together in our grief, or whether people push each other away and kind of split our community. And maybe I'll use the vaccination issue as the best example here, because it is a really hot issue still, and creating a lot of divide still in our community. So when talking about someone in your family or in your workplace about the vaccine issue, in terms of whether or not they've made their decision, it's really important to approach it first with a sense of genuine acknowledgement and interest. Again, regardless of whatever position you have, just to approach that in a very open way. Instead of trying to force, my belief on that person about being vaccinated. If I'm talking to a loved one or one of my staff at CMHA, it's really just opening up a conversation with them and using things like, I can totally see where you're coming from. I'm wondering if you've ever thought about it this way. You've raised a good point. I can see why, you're fearful about this. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Can I share some information with you, or can I link you to someone that can talk to you about that, that's a medical expert? It's so you're keeping the conversation open. You're recognizing there's tension there, but you're holding space for it, is another way to explain it. I think the more we can keep that space open and allow us to, explore that kind of tension together, so that people don't feel alone, they don't feel isolated, they don't feel shamed. Of course, we want people to be vaccinated because it's safe for them, it's safe for our workplaces, and it's safe for our community. But how they get there and how they work through the fears, we want to try and do that together, because again, that keeps our community together rather than creating that divide, which will just take us to a dark place much faster.
Absolutely. Thank you, Helen. And I hate to say it, I'm going to be a mean person and say, I don't believe that not getting vaccinated has anything to do with freedom. That's the part that I'm going to throw in there. That's the political part that we're not going to have that conversation tonight. But to be patient, as we do with everything, as you have said, and to ensure that there are safe spaces for people to have conversations about their fears.
It's a complicated issue. There's a personal choice piece, and then there's a greater good. We got to do good for our community piece, and those are clashing right now.
Yes.
And it is complicated. There's layers to it, emotional, political, you name it. So it's a bit of a minefield. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What you shared, there was one question about a lot of tension and short fuses and grumpiness. And I think you covered that. We all get grumpy under normal circumstances. Moreover, this where someone indicated 18 months of being completely exhausted. So thank you for that answer and strategies on how we move forward. Emery, someone is asking, how do we manage that they've heard report that the long haul COVID occurs in 1 case out of 10, which for them is scary. There's a Helen asked this question, not our Helen, but another Helen. And the person says, I have an acquaintance here in Guelph who reported that her severe long haul COVID improved after her first vaccination. Is there any data on whether vaccines affect the rate of long haul COVID?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first so I don't forget the second question. There is some data to suggest that vaccines reduce the length and severity of long haul COVID. That's hard to research because the pandemic is only a 1.5 years old, but it does make sense. There are other conditions, for example, human papillomavirus. Can I use a general word? Cervical. People who have cervical cancer as a result of human papillomavirus or early changes from human papillomavirus can have those changes wiped out if they get the Gardasil 9 vaccine, because Gardasil 9 stimulates the immune system to make antibodies, which then goes after any HPV that's left in the system. So it does make sense that an enhanced antibody response, an enhanced immune response might settle long haul symptoms, but I don't think that's definitely proven yet. The first part of the question, 1 in 10, I think we have to specify that it's 1 in 10 of people who get serious illness. There are a lot of folks out there who've had mild illness who are not reporting long haul symptoms. So most of the time, long haul symptoms occur in people who've had more serious illness, and I think and required hospitalization or had long-term symptoms at the beginning. And I think it's higher than 1 in 10. I can't quote the number, but I think it's more than 1 in 10 of folks that have been hospitalized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to follow up with a question still having to do with transmissibility. Brenda said that she's heard of a new variation of the COVID virus that is not responding to the double vaccines that we have had. She's not sure if it's the Mexican or a series of numbers. And she says that she's aware and has heard that there's some cases in the US. Can you comment on that? We talked about long haul, and it's great that it seemed that it's getting better for those who are dealing with this, but a newer than new variant coming out. Are you hearing about that variant at all?
Sorry, is that directed to me, Marva?
Yes.
Yes, I'm busy answering questions. Can you?
I knew you were.
Yes.
I had a feeling. I was speaking very slowly to the point where I'm
Yes,
not even
yes.
sure that I was understanding my own self. So
okay, go ahead, repeat that.
The person has said, Brenda has said, I have heard of a new variation of the COVID virus that is not responding to the double vaccines we have had. She said, I'm not sure if it is the Mexican or a series of numbers. We know, she says, we know there have been a few cases in the United States.
I think you're talking about the new variant. That's NU, not NEW.
Okay.
And from what I've read about that variant, it's the one most people are talking about. It doesn't even hold, it's nothing like the Delta variant. So the Delta variant is by far the most serious variant, the most transmissible variant. And because it's the one that predominates because it is transmissible, no other variant has been able to beat it out in any country. So far so good. It's just Delta we need to worry about.
Okay, That's
I
great.
think the other side of that question though, Marva, is the fear side, right?
Yes.
So one is the actual science side, which Anne Marie's answered really well. The other side is the fear.
Yes.
And I think setting expectations around what our world is and what we need to expect. We know that the COVID virus is going to continue to mutate.
Mhm.
There's already been several variations. It will continue to mutate. And of course, we know it mutates even more if there aren't vaccinations, right? So we need to try and set our expectations to know that we need to live with COVID and all of its variations. It's going to be around for a while. It's kind of like putting on our armor, right? We need to expect that it's going to be here. It's living in our community. We need to protect ourselves as much as we can with all of the public health guidelines, as well as vaccinations. And we need to continue to manage our fears. There's a lot of things that we can't control. That's one of them, right? In terms of what variants come, what mutations happen, whether or not our vaccinations work for those variants. You know, let's pray that they do, and let's know that our scientists continue to work on boosters and all kinds of things for the future as well. Right now, in this moment, is all we can control. And that's where our energy needs to lie. Because the minute we start giving away our worries to those kinds of things, we're going down a really dark path, a really slippery slope. And that's where that anxiety can overwhelm us. We stay where we are, we stay grounded. We know that we're doing our very best to get on top of it right now. And we stay safe and supported with each other.
Great, thanks, Helen. And staying with that thought, Tracy Armstrong is asking a couple of questions, is framed in a different kind of way. And you've touched on some of it, but I just want to read that question because I think it's really specific, and you'll be able to pull out what you may not have covered in what you just said. Tracy says, 2 questions to help the vaccine hesitant in her family. 1, is there any truth to the rumor that there have been multiple people locally in our health unit experiencing negative side effects from the COVID vaccine, up to and including death? And that you or Emery can answer that one. So she wants to know if there's any truth. I'm going to ask the second, and then either one of you can jump in. The second, is it true that there are many local medical personnel that are not receiving vaccines and are in fact some of the protesters at local hospitals? I know that's a tough one, but
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Because that's private health information. So I don't think those numbers would ever be publicized to say, listen, 50% of the Guelph General Hospital staff are not vaccinated. I think all we can know is that the hospitals and other organizations are insisting on vaccination for their staff or on consistent testing at the person's expense. But I don't know the answer to that question about healthcare workers.
The only thing I would say is healthcare workers are like the rest of our community. There are some healthcare workers that are fearful, that are struggling with embracing the vaccine, and are working through those feelings and those thoughts as well. And I'll be honest, I think there are some healthcare workers across Ontario and probably here locally as well that have decided, because of all this, that they're probably not in the right spot to work in healthcare right now. We've seen that happening for sure. And there's, again, a lot of layers to these kinds of decisions. But certainly there is a call for all of healthcare to be fully vaccinated, because it is part of our job to protect the most vulnerable. And that is something that we all take a lot of responsibility for when we sign up to work in healthcare. So it's a challenge, Marva. I wouldn't say 100% of healthcare is vaccinated, but I would say that I know our organization and many others are really working with their staff to really get them there. As to the others, I'm not aware, Anne-Marie, and I don't know if you are, of anyone that has died locally as a result of a vaccine. There's certainly been folks who have had some side effects, but those again have been quite minor.
Nope. Outside, and that's kind of the most fearful piece of misinformation that people are receiving, is that people are dying of the vaccine.
Mhm.
Outside of the deaths that occurred with the AstraZeneca vaccine, which we're all aware of, there are no deaths with the messenger RNA vaccine, unless someone had an allergic reaction, an anaphylactic reaction to the ingredients of the vaccine. And in North America, or in Canada specifically, you are asked to sit and wait 20 minutes after your vaccine in case you have an unknown allergic reaction, serious anaphylactic reaction to a component part. And then there's a whole team of individuals that are there to provide care to you if you have an anaphylactic reaction. There has not been a death from a messenger RNA vaccine in Canada, full stop, period. And there have not been serious side effects unless there's an underlying allergy that people were not aware of.
Thank you. Thank you both. This next question, I think it tugs on all of our heartstrings. And I have to say that I'm a grandma, so maybe tug on my heartstring, especially. No, you guys deal with folks who are grandparents as well, and little babies tug on everybody's heartstrings. This is from someone who do not wish to give their names. 3 months ago, our first grandchild was born. We're being very careful, patient, new grandparents. We are fully vaccinated and have had COVID tests to give the new parents peace of mind. Despite offering to help, the new parents are being very protective of their new cherub. And my question disappeared for some reason. Someone answering it in the background?
No, not me.
Um,
I think I was trying to answer that one at one point, but
Yeah.
I may not have finished it.
Okay, here it is. And so taking their lead, we have only seen the baby through a patio window on one visit and in an outdoor park. And the person says, "Oh, my heart. I just really want to snuggle with our grandson." Any advice to you both?
So Helen, I think there's an emotional answer and a scientific answer. And I think what you have to adhere to is the emotional answer, if I'm going to put it that way. You have to respect how the parents feel, and you cannot push parents of a newborn to change the standards they've set in their household around COVID-19. It just won't work to try to convince them otherwise. Over time, people will be less nervous if they have vaccinated relatives in the house. So if I had a young child under the age of 5 in my house, including a newborn, and their relatives the child's relatives were vaccinated, I wouldn't have a problem with those vaccinated people coming in the house, provided they were asymptomatic. I might have a problem with snuggles, because I'm also having a problem with hugs right now, because we know that 6% of individuals who are vaccinated can still get COVID to a minor degree. But I might be nervous about hugs. I don't think I'd keep grandparents outside, though.
Yeah, I think on an emotional level, I mean, new parents go through a range of emotions. That protective factor when you have your first child is enormous. And then apply that to a global pandemic, and it's times 1,000 in terms of just wanting to do everything you can to protect that child. So I think, again, walking through a compassion lens and an empathy lens, and truly understanding what those new parents are experiencing and feeling, and then taking baby steps. Let them let their comfort guide you, but certainly reassure them that you're doing all the right things and that you're also there to support, because we also know that new parents are exhausted and don't get enough sleep and all those things, right? So drop some meals off, have some friendly and supportive phone calls, just be there in every way that you can, and know that this is a temporary problem, and eventually I'm sure they will start to feel more comfortable, especially as that little one gets a little bit older.
Can I add?
And virtual visits.
Yes, virtual visits are always good.
FaceTime.
can I add a bit more to that, Marva, as well?
Mhm.
We've lost the word bubble, and I think we might move back into discussing bubbles as we move into the winter months and we move inside.
Mhm.
You can have an expanded bubble of vaccinated people, 25 people meeting indoors, and if you're not comfortable with that, make all of the people in your bubble not associate with any other bubbles outside. So that could be a way for parents to feel, new parents to feel more comfortable, is they know that grandparents are not only vaccinated, but they are not in any other person's bubble.
Mhm. And to add to that, one question is the numbers are going up in Guelph, and what's the cause? Could it be that, again, we are not adhering to bubbles anymore?
I think the cause in Guelph, as in many other communities, it's great to see the overall numbers, right?
Mhm.
I think we need to stop looking at the number of new cases fairly soon and start looking at the number of hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and deaths.
Mm.
Because when we say there's 35 new cases in Guelph, if 34 of them are mild illnesses, do we need to really worry? And a lot of them right now are from outbreaks that occurred at large gatherings that were not really prohibited under the present healthcare or public health restrictions. There have been 2 outbreaks in downtown Guelph in restaurants. There are several, many cases coming from the University of Guelph and the big party they had there in September. And there are new cases coming from schools, as we know, and these are going to drive the numbers up. But so far, those cases were transmitted to the kids outside the school system, and then they were tested because they had symptoms.
Mhm. Thank you. This is from my friend Louise McCallum, and is that the one that you're answering, Emery? I'm going to ask you that question.
I think I've finished. I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah.
totally confused here. Yeah.
So Louise, hi Louise. The requirement for customers at restaurants to be fully vaccinated, and of course, there's a scientific as well as an emotional one. And Helen, please jump in here as well. Restaurants to be fully vaccinated is very welcome. She said, however, we are still not feeling that it will be safe to eat inside a restaurant unless the staff are all required to be vaccinated as well. Is there any chance that will be added to the mandate? Does anybody know that is related to public health?
Added to the mandate in terms of asking that everyone who works in a
restaurant be vaccinated.
vaccinated. I haven't heard that that's up and coming.
No, I haven't either.
That would be interesting to look into, I think, with public health, and maybe we can send a note and add it to some of the questions to be answered later on. And chances are this would have to be something that would come down provincially, would it not?
Yes.
If they're going to widen the mandate. So there's going to be a political answer to that.
And again, local public health often knows just before the rest of public health does, because it comes from Public Health Ontario and not individual public health units.
Thank you. And what about kids having lunch in a room of kids without masks on at school?
So I think that's a bit of a concern, and I have to ask more questions, because what I've heard is that the kids are not necessarily sitting at a separate desk and socially distanced at the time that they're having lunch. They should be, because if you don't have a mask on, the next tool is to be 6 feet away from other folks, and then a short period of time eating, mask back on, and outside, where we know transmission is far less likely when kids are outside. So if that's happening and they're just eating at their desks, we're more than fine. Again, because most of the people in the community are vaccinated and there's not much COVID in the area. But if kids are sitting close together, I would be worried about that.
Yeah, and I would say that that is a workplace best practice, whether it's a school or our office or a factory, because of course we know when we eat, we have to take our mask off. And that's where transmission is just much more likely to happen. So that would certainly be best practice no matter what.
And I know in restaurants, of course, if you're standing up and walking around, you have to take You have to
That's
put
right.
your mask on. So I imagine it probably the same thing in school as well. When kids are
Yes.
sitting down, it's okay, you're eating. And hopefully when you're eating, you're not talking as much, or try to deter kids from talking quite as much when they're eating. That way they're not transmitting the virus. Thank you for that. This person has said, Helen, that they feel like they're losing hope because they feel that vaccine rates are so high. And Marie, I think you just said that it's not that high. And she said, yet the protocols are still so present and affect everything I do. When does it end? I thought things would be better once the vaccines were rolled out. There are a number of people feeling this way.
So again, I think there's a scientific answer and an emotional answer.
Yes.
The scientific answer is that realistically, until we can get our children under 12 vaccinated, we need to protect them, which means we need to adhere to restrictions, and we need to get as many people vaccinated who are over the age of 12 as possible. The emotional answer is, I know how you feel, and I'm nervous about this winter as well, because it's been lovely being outside with vaccinated people, and even being outside distance from unvaccinated people. That's been awesome, and on my porch and so on. And I'm worried about what things will be like this winter. The fear factor, it is much less likely that in your community that has an 80+% vaccination rate that you will get COVID. And so go to that restaurant if you feel comfortable, because it will be safe in that restaurant. I think if the staff are not vaccinated, but you have a mask on while you're talking to the server and they have a mask on, it's safe. It'd be preferential for them to be vaccinated as well. But even though the restrictions are in place, we can be much more comfortable about not getting COVID-19 this winter, and also about those that are close to us not getting COVID-19 if they're vaccinated, or not getting serious COVID-19. Does that make a difference? It does for me. I kind of cling to that, knowing that, and that I can move out and about in public still wearing a mask and be comfortable. That's different than last winter.
Thank you for that. Helen?
Yeah, I would just add the emotional part of that. It is discouraging at times, right? Because we've worked so hard to get here. We have vaccinated so many thousands of people, and yet we're still faced with this dilemma every single day. And we don't have the kind of life that we still all want to experience. So of course it's discouraging and it's frustrating, but we also know that we have made a tremendous amount of progress. Things could be a lot worse than what they are now. When I think of our dear Canadians who live in Alberta, and how, tragic the circumstances are there for many people, and the hardships in the hospital system capacity at the brink, like it could be so much worse for us in Ontario. We've done the right things. We continue to do the right things. We have to hold on to that hope and know that things will gradually get better. I always think about the first COVID-19 strain. We would have been fine and moved on long ago if we had just the COVID-19 strain, but the Delta variant has made our situation much more risky and much more dire. It's insidious, it's sneaky, it's much more transmissible, it's much more lethal. So it's made our situation more complicated, and that's what we have to acknowledge and know that that's the difference. That's why we're in this situation now. The other thing is, and again, I go back to a comment I made earlier, continue to find the joy in your life. No matter what the restrictions are right now, there's still a lot of things that we can do. So we have to always be careful about how much we are focusing on the things that we've lost versus the things that we can still enjoy, take joy from. And again, keep in mind that if you're really staying stuck and not being able to experience that joy, that's a sign for you to go and seek some help and start to unpack some of that and work through it. And so many people are doing that through this pandemic. It's a real gift to be able to do that. We have support and services and counseling available in many forms, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. And really taking that time and working through those feelings is so important, and it can take some of that pressure off and make sure that you're focusing on the things that mean something and bring you joy.
Thank you for that.
Marva, can I answer one question that I'm answering right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just because it's like, it's hard to type. Somebody asked me this question today because this is silly, I'm a doctor, but I was really happy to see somebody with a mild cold today. I knew their COVID test was negative, and I worked them up. I haven't seen colds and flus in 18 months. So someone asked me today, and there's a question here now. So if we're all wearing masks and taking precautions, why are people getting colds and flus? The Delta variant is more transmissible than the cold viruses. The R value for the Delta is somewhere between 2 and 3. For a cold, it's about 1.7. That's not much different. But cold viruses and flu viruses can be spread on surfaces as well as the air, and COVID is an airborne disease. So if you're in school and you're playing with a toy that someone else just used, and little kids are not necessarily going to wash their hands all the time, you can easily bring that cold or flu virus in close to your face, and you've got it. Whereas, or even transmit it later on when your mask is off. Whereas with COVID, it has to be mask-free, someone less than 6 feet away from you, spreading that virus through the air.
I think the other piece of that, Anne Marie, that we've seen a lot of is allergies this year. Allergies have been absolutely horrible. And again, the symptoms look the same as COVID. My poor daughter sounds like she's underwater right now with her allergies. It's just all right here. But that's the other thing that, again, that brings a lot of people anxiety, because it looks the checkbox, a number of things that look like COVID, but it's actually allergies, not COVID. So that's where that COVID test is so helpful, right?
And I'm seeing, like you usually see, you talk to a person with a cold and you ask them, is there anybody else in your house that's sick? And it's like, yeah, this person had it 5 days ago and that person had it. So people are transmitting cold viruses now among themselves in their homes. There's no cold virus vaccine. Their masks aren't on at home. So they are bringing those cold viruses, and soon flu viruses, most likely into the school system, where it can be transmitted on surfaces. And we haven't seen the flu yet. It's not flu season until usually the end of November, most of the time December and January. These are just colds we're seeing now.
Okay, thank you both so much. 2 questions having to do with air purification and where a parent is. And you were talking a moment ago about virus transmission and people having colds, being on the subway. I actually had a 3-hour bus ride to Toronto on Friday afternoon because I missed the GO train. And so I decided to take the bus. And of course, it was a milk run bus. So it took me all over the place. And I just sat there. It was great the way they had everybody set up, and seats that you weren't allowed to sit in because of the 6 foot rule. But all I needed to hear was someone sneezing, and I want to run the other way, or traveling on the subway to my host's home. It's that sneeze, you're listening for it, or that cough. I found myself being not too far from someone, and I always have all these sanitizers in my hand, and a person sneezed, and they actually sneezed in their hand. And at the best of times, I hate that, but trying not to judge. So I ran over and said, here's some sanitizer, because there was no washroom there for them to wash their hands. And they said, no, it's okay. It's not the virus. It's just allergies. I'm thinking, it doesn't matter what it is. Please use a sanitizer. I didn't say that, but I just marked that I will not be going near that person. So all of that is also psychological, right? With allergies and with everything else. For the person sneezing and coughing, you have a coughing fit, everybody sees you and they just want to stay away from you, and they wonder whether you have the virus. Psychological. Or it could be you yourself that you're really quite worried. A teacher was talking about being used to sitting in her classroom and having her lunch. And she likes to sit there, with her students there. Should she continue doing that? She has an air purifier, and she thinks she's taking precautions, but she wants to make sure that that is okay. If not, then she will need to change that habit. And in addition to that, there's another comment from someone said they were reading in the newspaper some time back that a family that rented their basement out tested positive for COVID-19 and said they got it from the basement tenants. The person says, I'm currently renovating a house with a basement apartment and wondered if that is possible, considering that they're going to be sharing ductwork through both places. We do have an air exchanger, they said, in the house, but now I'm concerned about this and wonder if this is true. Now, I know this is technical, scientific, and emotional.
There were cases on the cruise ships way back when where people were cordoned off into their what do you call them? Their rooms.
Cabins.
Cabins.
Yeah.
And the virus still spread. So you can have a situation where your basement apartment has the airflow set up in such a way that the air moves right up to the upstairs apartment through the airflow tracks or whatever you call them. And it's an airborne illness. So it could possibly be transmitted that way. I don't think that's common, but I believe there are cases where it has been transmitted that way. How do you get around that? I don't know, because I don't know about heating and air circulation and how filters might affect that, but you might want to talk to an expert in that area before proceeding.
Is that one of the scientific comments about schools and the importance of air exchangers and ductworks to make sure when the kids go back to school? This is earlier on. I remember those conversations happening about
and the air filters definitely help. So an open window and good air filtration really helps keep the virus from spreading from person to person. Instead, the virus just goes out with the air filtration system or goes out the window. So that slows transmission down in one classroom. But I don't think in schools necessarily it's easily transmitted from one classroom to another unless they're connected in some way through an airflow system. So filters do work, but you need to be careful that you know which way your air is flowing in the house and how it's flowing and whether there's direct ability from air to go from one place into another place upstairs or so on.
Thank you. And I might add that Joan, who's a teacher, thank you, Joan, for being a teacher and what you do for young kids, mentioned that she leaves her window open and also the door open in addition to the air filtration system, which is great. And I think that Helen is going to answer that as well. Helen, I have another question for you having to do with schools. I was just made aware, Kathy says, of screenTimeForKids.ca, providing a program for at-home screening kids at certain schools in Guelph. At home for at-home screening kids. Wow, that's a new phrase. At certain schools in Guelph. However, it appears that they're only available at 3 schools. Do you know if this program might be extended to include more or all schools in Upper Grand District School Board? And that might be something, if you don't know it, that we can inquire of the school board, whether that's possible.
I don't know off the top of my head. Sometimes what they'll do is with a new program like that is just pilot it and start small in a number of schools, see how it works before they roll it out to the entire school board. So it might very well be a pilot. But I can certainly find out, Marva, and then we can post that information on both our CMHA Facebook page as well as Anne Marie's.
Great, wonderful. Sarah wants to know, do you have any thoughts, this might be for you, Anne Marie, on the recent information that Moderna has now proven more effective than Pfizer, rather than them being the same? It's that battle of the vaccines that seem to be going on. And I'm going to double and triple up on you if you don't mind. So Moderna versus Pfizer, Moderna now being more effective. And someone also had a question about one of my daughters, they say, has Pfizer and then Moderna. So she cannot go to the States. Would she be eligible for a 3rd shot at some point in Ontario? Yeah. And she says, I believe they're already doing this in Saskatchewan. So those 2 questions for you.
Okay, so Moderna versus Pfizer depends on the research, but I think some very good research has shown that Moderna is maybe just slightly more effective than Pfizer, but not more effective enough to choose Pfizer over Moderna. Again, take the first vaccine that's available to you. We haven't had to say that for a while, have we? And I think both Moderna and Pfizer are approved for use in the States. So Is she certain that her relative, I guess it was a daughter, can't go into the States with those 2 vaccines? As far as I know, you can't go into the States at all by car right now. The border's closed, so it doesn't matter which vaccines you have. And I think Canadians can go into the States and get on a flight, and any approved vaccine in the States is fine for them. And it depends on the airlines. I think most airlines are asking that people have 2 vaccines, but as long as they're approved for use in the States, I think they can be different. I can look that up, but I'm pretty
I
sure.
think it was the AstraZeneca
Yeah.
vaccine that was the concern, right? Because that's not approved
Yeah, but not
in
Pfizer
the
and
US.
Moderna. I think
No,
to
Yeah.
Pfizer and Moderna
that's
both
fine.
approved.
Yeah.
That's what I recall as well. And this is
Can I answer this question to
yes.
Marva? Because I'm answering it right now. Flu shots come out last week of October, first week of September. There's actually Novavax is working on a combination flu shot and COVID vaccine,
Oh,
which won't be out until next year. But it does answer the question that COVID vaccines can now be taken at the same time as any other vaccine. There doesn't need to be a separation between those vaccines. The COVID vaccines don't interact with other vaccines or make them less effective, and the COVID vaccine is not made less effective by using other vaccines. So it is safe to get the flu shot at the same time that you're getting your COVID shot, and they're actually working on a combined vaccine.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is a wonderful question. I think I know the answer, but I think it's important to read it. Marianne writes, can a healthy 70-year-old double vaccinated be with their under 5 grandchild if they wear the N95 masks and goggles for a couple of hours?
Okay, you don't need the goggles or the N95 mask. You might want to put a level 2 surgical mask on, but other than that, you're vaccinated, it's safe. So vaccinated with no symptoms and no history of contact with COVID-19 in the last week or so, you're safe. You don't need the whole get up.
Thank you. This next question, we're coming down to the wire. It's 8:04 and we're wrapping up at 8:15. So maybe take a couple more questions. Susan writes that she heard a local expert in a video today, who shall remain unnamed,
I bet.
talked to an anti-vax rally on the weekend. He has serious credentials, she says, and was speaking out against U of G rules. He claimed that vaccines for young men 12 to 15 cause 6 times the rate of heart issues and the problems caused by COVID. I've also heard myself, Marva, has heard people talk about impotency as well. I was shocked to hear this, and how can we disprove it? He is doing serious damage, it seems, to you both.
So first of all, this is me pulling my hair out. Everybody notice? Okay, got that. So I think I know who you're talking about. Again, I won't mention this person's name. There is no connection between the COVID vaccine and sterility or infertility. Period. Full stop. In a recent post of mine, I discussed why that was the case. In terms of myocarditis, endocarditis, 1 in 600,000 cases of individuals who have the messenger RNA vaccine, so 1 in 600,000 vaccines, mostly in men between the ages of 19 and 30, 1 in 600,000 case of endocarditis, myocarditis, mild symptoms, fully recover, no long-term heart damage. You get COVID and you could go into heart failure and never recover from that.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to that, Marva, that fear is spread through misinformation.
Yes.
And it's a great example of making sure that you are getting the reliable and science-based information from the right sources.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, it's confusing because a lot of folks have credentials. A lot of websites look legitimate, but you ignore all the noise and you go right to the sources of reliable scientific information. That science is what guides us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take comfort in that. Fear is really about the misinformation and that uncertainty. And that's the slippery slope. You don't even need to go there. If you stick to several websites, including our public health website here locally, or the Ontario Public Health website, even if you just use that website alone and nothing else, you will get the straight facts.
Great, thank you. Someone is asking about how to support staff and management of establishments required to enforce vaccine certification rules in Ontario starting tomorrow, they said. They're concerned about protests and pushback starting at these locations. Any strategies on how to support these staff members? That's a tough one.
It is, but the first thing that I would say is to expect them. So know that you're going to be walking into work, whatever your workplace is, and know that those protesters are going to be there, and then you're ready. You're emotionally ready. Some of it is you need to put that armor on. You need to change your expectations. You need to know it's going to be tough out there, but in your workplace, you are doing 100% the right thing, because you are protecting the most vulnerable. You are protecting people in your establishment, and you are really participating in getting our community up to herd immunity, which of course protects everyone. You're doing the right thing, but it can sometimes feel wrong when those protests are out there. So you have to really do your best to put your armor on and to know that all of those things are being done for the right reason, again, based on science and not based on fear. And the more you can talk through that with your colleagues at work, you can form that little circle, you can keep your armor on with each other and support each other through that. It's tough, especially if you're walking in and out of work. I know when I was watching the Antivaxx protests and watching the hospital workers at the windows, looking out of the windows at those protests, my heart broke for those hospital workers, because I thought, well, you know, it's so disheartening. But it's not personal. It's not personal. It really is about a really difficult issue, and they believe that they're right in that. And so it really is trying to separate that, protecting ourselves, and knowing that you're doing the right thing based on science.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. That's so, so important, because a part of protecting ourselves is also protecting others, both emotionally and physically. Thank you. That makes so much sense. Someone said that, why were sore throat and runny nose removed from the symptom list? I'm afraid of kids going to school and then perhaps having the virus and it not being noticed.
So sore throat and runny nose were removed as isolated symptoms. So if I have a patient coming in and they've only got a sore throat and no other symptoms, I see them in the office, and whether they're vaccinated or not. And if a child just has a runny nose with no other symptoms, I can see that child to reassure the parents, and it's not considered COVID. And they're removed as we learn more about COVID and research individuals that have had COVID. What are the most common symptoms? Those isolated symptoms, not in conjunction with any other symptoms, do not indicate COVID.
Thank you. Cindy writes that the States is not allowing mixed vaccines. So in response to what we said, but it's something that we can certainly look into. I thought it was just AstraZeneca. But it's something that can be looked into. And a few people signed on late and is still asking about the under 12 vaccines and when that might be available. So at 8:11, if I can ask you both to provide some closing remarks, and maybe you can add in the under 12 again, reiterate that piece, please. Anne-Marie, is that okay?
Yes, that's great.
That's all right. The bell just went off.
Yes, that was on my computer actually. Okay, so still a needed event, obviously, these webinars, especially as we head into a continued unknown territory. Unknown how COVID will behave this winter as we all move inside, how COVID will behave in individuals who are vaccinated, although we think that the risk is extremely low for serious illness. And so it's really important to continue supporting each other. kindness is very important, and kindness to those folks who are vaccine hesitant. I've had 5 conversations in the last week and a half with vaccine hesitant people where I listened to every concern they had. I answered their questions without any judgment whatsoever, because in fact, I feel empathy for their fear and their concern and the misinformation that has just muddied the waters. All of those folks are getting vaccinated. So most vaccine hesitant will get vaccinated eventually. And if they can get into the hands of a healthcare professional they trust, there's a greater likelihood that they will be vaccinated. The vaccine adverse, I think a lot of them will just become vaccine hesitant and will likely get a vaccine, and a small percentage will stay the way they are. And it's best not to have conversations with folks like that because they're so upsetting. And as Helen said, we need to stay in places of joy around people that bring us up. And I believe that people who are extreme in their thoughts about the vaccine, that also comes from a place of fear and confusion. And I just accept that, but I choose not to engage in that because I find it very upsetting. I mostly find the hostility that comes back to be quite upsetting. Kids under 12, the trials are showing that the Pfizer vaccine is very effective in this group. It may be more effective in kids than it is in adults. I didn't say that before, but it's looking to be more effective in kids. And it will be presented to the FDA, which is the American Review Board for New Drugs and Vaccines. And they will likely approve it for emergency use. We're usually just weeks or a couple of months behind. We expect it to be presented to Health Canada in October or November, approved for emergency use in December, and available in January. Those are long timelines. It may be shorter than that.
Thank you for that. That's really great. I have one quick question that I didn't cover and suggest covering in the summary. There are a few questions about booster shots, especially for seniors. Can you just comment on that really quickly, and then over to Helen?
Yes.
For
So
her closing.
booster shots right now in this country and in this province, are available to 4 groups of people. I won't go into detail about that because it'll take too long, but you can log on to your local public health website to find that list. It's a solid list across the province, and it is not very many people who are eligible for that 3rd shot. The next group, I think, will be people in nursing homes. The next after that will be people over 80, and squeezed in before the rest, I think, will be people who've had an AstraZeneca vaccine and can't travel anywhere in the States and often to other countries without having 2 of the same vaccines. So we believe that group will be up before the general population. It's coming. It's coming. Can I also say, though, that there's some question as to whether the general population that's not at risk needs a 3rd shot. It's not confirmed yet that that's necessary. Again, we're looking at vaccines to reduce illness and hospitalization. So even if my immunity is down and I have less antibodies, I'm still not ending up in the hospital or in the ICU. And Pfizer is now working on a vaccine for, in particular, the Delta variant. And so unless they show me good proof that I need a 3rd shot as a healthy woman under the age of 65, I'm holding out for a shot that's designed specifically for the Delta variant.
And the autoimmune, those who have depressed autoimmune systems around the booster shot, are they part of the group as well?
So I wonder if Allison, we can provide a link to everybody to the Guelph Wellington Dufferin website. I can read the list to you now, just briefly. It's individuals who have had a solid organ transplant, so a liver transplant, a kidney transplant, individuals who've had a stem cell transplant. There's a whole list of medications, mostly chemotherapeutic medications and autoimmune meds for autoimmune conditions that are eligible for that 3rd shot. So you really have to look on the public health website if you think you're on a medication that is on that list. And the last one, immunocompromised folks who have AIDS or who have end-stage HIV, which thankfully is not very common in this province or country anymore. So that's the list so far. And again, that can be found on any local public health website.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And Helen, if you could bring us with some hope and some strategies of coping with all the misinformation and strategies of supporting each other, as well as supporting our healthcare workers and even our restaurateurs, those in the service industry, and anything else that you think that we will need to cover. Thank you, Alison, for putting the link up for us.
Yeah, I would really just say how important it is at this stage of our journey to hold on to that hope. It can be discouraging to think that we're not there yet, but it's also incredibly important to remember how far we've come. So progress, not perfection. We've made a tremendous amount of progress to get here. It's still not perfect. When you think of those vaccines, we are so lucky in this country to have an abundance of vaccinations for all of us, but they're not perfect. They don't protect us 100%, right? So progress, not perfection. Continue to do what you need to do to protect yourself physically with all the public health guidelines, but equally as important as the mask and the hand washing and the physical distancing are the things that you need to do to protect your mental wellness. First and foremost, take care of yourself, keep yourself grounded. That means you eat well, you sleep well, you hydrate, you exercise, you do all the things your body needs, and emotionally stay connected to the people that add to your joy, that add to that sense of being grounded, and that give you hope and comfort. And there are, I'm sure, many people that fill those buckets for you. Search those people out, connect with them, and continue to do things like mindfulness, meditation, and the things that keep us all grounded. Again, Here 24/7 is always available. Literally, you can't sleep in the night. Your mind is full of worry, anxiety. You pick up the phone, you call 1-844 Here 24/7. We're literally here around the clock. We never want people to feel alone or that they have to manage this situation, which is extraordinary, on their own. We all either have personal networks and we all have access to care networks through mental health and addiction services, through our primary care providers, through our EAP. There's always help available. And then there's also virtual care as well that you can seek anonymously. So please don't sit with it. We're always here to support you and be there to support your journey.
And as Helen says, recovery is a conscious effort. I just want to thank both Helen and Anne-Marie. There are a few questions that I know Anne-Marie is typing away, and you'll likely see it on her Facebook page, or Alison and Helen's team with Megan will be able to answer a few questions, that anything that we didn't get to. I think we got to most of your questions. Thanks to Helen and thanks to Anne-Marie. We really, really appreciate it. We want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for the really lovely comments about the importance of this conversation and how it has helped you. It helps us to determine how we continue with this webinar, or whether we continue or not. If you are interested in it, we will continue to try to support you in this way. And a reminder as well that if you are interested in donating to Bracelet of Hope, there are links on the Facebook pages that you can go to that website and donate. And we look forward to seeing you again in October. It'll be one of the Tuesdays in October. We're not sure which one yet, but maybe we'll try to get one in before Thanksgiving or just after Thanksgiving. We thank you so much again. And thank you, Alison. Thank you, Megan, making sure that this works really well. Thank you, everyone. Have a very safe week. Don't forget, wash your hands, cover your face, work to get double vaccinated. Be patient with your family members who are still thinking about it. Stay well and stay safe. And thank you to all those teachers, students, and parents who are now out there in a new kind of world after summer break. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.